What's going on, everybody? Kalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the TCL Stylus 5G. Now, as of the recording of this video, this phone is currently only offered through T-Mobile and Metro by T-Mobile, but with how impressive it's been so far, I do hope it ends up being offered factory unlocked or at least added to more carriers in the near future. But with that being said, if you want to learn more about this phone, stay tuned because I'm going to be going over everything you need to know about it to help you decide if it's the right one for you. So without further ado, let's get started. So with the TCL Stylus 5G, we're getting a 6.1-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 395, an aspect ratio of 20.5:9, and a screen to body ratio of about 90.2%. So this is a real good display all around. At 6.81 inches, it's about the size of some of the largest flagship phones, so when you're consuming content, you're going to get a great experience there. And in addition to just being large, we also got some real good dimensions here. With an aspect ratio of 20.5:9, we're getting a taller and more narrow form factor, so when you're doing something like streaming a video or playing a game in landscape mode, for example, you're going to get a much more immersive cinematic experience, and things are just going to look better overall. In addition to this, if you're doing something like reading or scrolling through social media, you can fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. So as far as size and dimensions go, especially for just being a mid-range phone, this display is really impressive. And not only is it large with great dimensions, but we also got real good quality here. With the 1080p resolution, we're getting a nice crisp image. And not only that, but despite not having an AMOLED or anything fancy like that, the colors and brightness look real good as well, and we got some good viewing angles, so if you're outside in the sun, for example, you'll still be able to see your display pretty easily. So in general, even compared to some of the higher end phones, this display is still impressive, and considering it's a pretty affordable mid-range phone, as far as the display is concerned, this is one of the better options in this price range. Now, all that being said, this really doesn't come as a big surprise, since after all, TCL is primarily known for making TVs, and they really put the same technology into their phones, resulting in a real nice looking display. So if you're consuming a lot of content, whether you're streaming videos, playing games, or just looking at social media, the TCL Stylus 5G is going to be a great choice for you. Now for storage with this phone, we're getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion. Pretty average amount of storage for a mid-range 5G phone, but not bad at all. For the average user, you're probably not going to need more than this. In fact, for that matter, you most likely won't even need a microSD card. But if you're more of a power user, if you have like 100GB of apps or something like that, which still is probably not most people, then you can always use a microSD card to offload stuff like photos and videos, for example. So again, for the vast majority of people who are going to be looking at a phone like this, you're going to have plenty of storage on this phone. Now to give you an idea of what this kind of storage actually looks like, as you can see here, right now I'm using 20% of the space, and that comes out to around 26GB. Now as far as what I actually have on the phone, I do have a fair amount of apps, just the stuff most people are going to be using on a daily basis, stuff like social media, streaming platforms, that sort of thing, and I also have a decent amount of games too. But as you can see, despite me having a fair amount of stuff on this phone, the system actually still takes up more than all of that combined. And overall, besides stuff like photos and videos, I honestly can't even think of what else I would want to add to this phone. So again, unless you're really a power user, unless you're downloading every game on Google Play or something like that, then 128GB is most likely going to be plenty of storage for you. Now there's no wireless charging with this phone, not really a big surprise there, but we do get a fingerprint scanner and face unlock, so it's always nice to have two options to unlock it. The fingerprint scanner is located right here on the power key, definitely a convenient spot, maybe not as premium looking as an in-display fingerprint scanner, but having it on the power key is really something you still can't go wrong with. But with that being said, let's go ahead and give this fingerprint scanner a try and see how well it works. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, it's real fast and responsive, no issues here at all. And remember, if you don't want to use the fingerprint scanner, there's always face unlock as well. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, we got a hole punch for the front facing camera, looks real nice and clean, and this camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode. So as far as features go, this phone has pretty much everything. So if you're taking a lot of photos and you want a wider variety of features, then the TCL Stylus 5G is going to be a great option. Now for video recording, it's pretty average. With this phone, we get a max recording quality of 1080p at 30 frames per second, so unfortunately no 4K or anything, and that's really too bad. I would have at least liked to see it be able to shoot in 1080p at 60 frames per second, so you could get smoother footage, slow motion videos, stuff like that. But unfortunately, when it comes to video recording, this phone's features are pretty basic. So to give you an idea of what this camera can do, here are some photos taken with the main camera. For being a mid-range phone, I do think it's pretty decent, but really nothing special, compared to something like a Samsung Galaxy A33 5G for example, or even some of the mid-range Motorola phones like a Moto G Stylus. These photos really aren't that impressive, and if you really want to take good photos you're going to keep for something like social media for example, and that's one of your main priorities, I do think you can do better. But for what they are, it is okay. I mean, if you're more of a casual user, and you're not really that concerned with the quality, I do think it's at least acceptable. Now here's a couple photos taken with the ultra-wide camera. In my opinion, these photos aren't really that impressive. There's a lot of distortion, and I mean, pretty much every mid-range ultra-wide camera is going to have some distortion, but with this phone I feel like it's even worse than usual. So again, if you're taking lots of photos that you really want to keep and quality is important to you, then I definitely do think even in this price range you can do better. Here's a portrait photo. Now judging by the other cameras, I wasn't really expecting a whole lot, but I will say this photo actually turned out pretty nice. So that just goes to show that even though this camera really isn't the best, it's definitely not the worst either. And if you are taking a couple photos here and there for social media for example, something like that where it's not super important but you still want to get some decently nice photos, then this camera, while not being particularly impressive, still will get the job done. Now here's a 1080p test video, and it's really the same kind of thing. While the quality isn't really horrible per se, I still wouldn't really recommend this phone for something like vlogging for example, where you want to take higher quality videos you're actually going to use. Now if you're just making TikToks or doing something for social media, or maybe you're just using Snapchat where the quality really doesn't matter, then this phone will get the job done. But I would say if you're doing anything beyond that, then as far as video recording goes, you can definitely do better. So overall, when it comes to the camera, am I really impressed? No. But is it the worst out there? Not by a long shot. So if you're more of a casual camera user and you don't really care too much about the quality, but you do want to get a few nice photos here and there, and maybe you're making videos for something like social media where the quality isn't super important and it basically just has to be passable, then the TCL Stylus 5G will get the job done. But again, if you're taking a lot of photos and videos, and that's really one of the primary things you're doing with your phone, then even in this price range, there will be better options. Now as far as RAM and processor go, with the TCL Stylus 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. And then obviously this is a 5G phone, so of course you get access to the 5G network, all the latest and greatest technology, all that, which is definitely a nice thing because even though 4G is not going away anytime soon, and it's really not the end of the world if you have an LTE phone, I still personally do think that in 2022, if you're getting a new phone, it might as well be 5G because 5G is really the future. And if you're going through all the trouble to look for and get a new phone, why not also get access to your carrier's best network? Now this phone is actually quite a bit faster than I was expecting. Sure, it's not going to be anywhere near as fast as a $1,400 flagship phone for example, but for a mid-range 5G phone that's under $300, it definitely does perform really well. If you're doing stuff like social media, web browsing, and even some mobile gaming and stuff like that, the TCL Stylus 5G will get the job done, and you're probably going to have a decent experience here. Now again, if you're coming from a flagship phone, like an older iPhone for example, or maybe something like a Samsung Galaxy S10, then yeah, you're probably going to notice a downgrade in performance, but at the same time, again, for a mid-range phone, I do think the TCL Stylus 5G is pretty fast. Now I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone and it came back with a single core score of 560 and a multi-core score of 1755. Now what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your score to this to see whether or not this phone will actually be an upgrade for you, because again, depending on what you currently have, it really may or may not be. But I would say in general, if you're really looking for a mid-range phone that has good performance and is decently fast when you're doing stuff like web browsing, social media, and playing games, then for what it is, the TCL Stylus 5G is a pretty solid option. Now for the battery with this phone, we're getting a 4000 mAh battery that supports 18-watt fast charging. Honestly, in this price range among mid-range phones, definitely not the best battery out there. Now, objectively by itself, a 4000 mAh battery really isn't small, and you're gonna get a decent amount of battery life. I mean, it'll easily get you through the day, if not maybe a day and a half or 2 days, depending on how you're actually using it. But at the same time, there are plenty of mid-range phones with 5000 mAh batteries or even 4500. In fact, I want to say the vast majority of the direct competitors to this phone do have 5000 mAh batteries. Now, not all of them have 18-watt fast charging, but when it comes to battery specs, I feel like fast charging is the least of most people's concerns. I mean, a lot of people probably don't even have a fast charger, and really battery size is definitely important in this day and age. A lot of people have more mobile lifestyles where they're not always around a charger, so having a lot of battery life is definitely an important thing. So if you're really looking for a phone that does have a lot of battery life, this is not going to be your best choice. But if it's not super important to you, maybe you're like me and you just plug your phone in all day. In that situation, the battery on this phone will be perfectly fine. But again, if you're maybe traveling a lot, for example, and battery is one of your top priorities, then this is something to keep in mind, because in this price range, you will have much better options. Now this phone does come with Android 12, so you're going to get the latest current version of Android. Now this isn't really an exceptional thing per se, but some phones in this price range do only have Android 11 for whatever reason. So if you do want the latest version of Android, then with this phone, you won't have to worry. It does of course have TCL skin on it, and while some people might not really be a big fan of it, I personally think it runs really well, and compared to something like Motorola's operating system, for example, I do like TCL skin a little better. It's really simple and straightforward, and there's not a whole lot of bloatware, so if you're maybe new to Android and you want something really simple and user-friendly, then I do think you'll probably like TCL's skin. Now this phone also does have NFC, so if you like to make mobile contactless payments using tap and pay, then you'll be happy to know that with this phone, you'll be able to do that with no problem. But now that we've gone over some of the specs and features, let's take a closer look at the device itself. So on the left side here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the microSD card. On the bottom, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack, which, keep in mind, there are actually some phones in this price range that are getting rid of headphone jacks, so it's nice to see that this phone still does have it. Then of course, we got the microphone, USB-C port, speaker, and the stylus, which we are going to talk about in a minute. On the right side, we got the power key, which again doubles as a fingerprint scanner, volume down, volume up. On the top of the phone, we got the noise cancelling microphone. On the back, we got our cameras and our flash, TCL branding right down here, and that's pretty much it. Now as far as the materials go, I feel like the build quality itself is decent, the phone doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart or anything, and the buttons are pretty solid, they don't feel flimsy or anything. But at the same time, this phone is made entirely of plastic, except of course the glass display. And on one hand, this is nothing new, pretty much every phone in this price range is going to be like this, but at the same time, this plastic feels a little cheap, and this phone really doesn't have a whole lot of weight to it. So if you want something that looks and feels a little bit more premium, then definitely keep this in mind, because despite having decent build quality, this phone really doesn't feel premium at all. Now as the name suggests, this phone of course does have a stylus, making it one of the few mid-range phones that has this feature. In fact, pretty much the only other phone in this price range that does have a stylus is the Moto G Stylus, and maybe the Moto G Stylus 5G if you really want to consider that being in this price range, seeing that it is double the price of this phone, but that's a whole different story. The bottom line is, a mid-range phone with a stylus is not something you're going to see every day. But that being said, as far as the actual quality of the stylus goes, it is pretty decent. I wouldn't really say it's the best. For that matter, the Moto G Stylus is a little bit better in my opinion, but for what it is, it does get the job done. Now you're not going to be doing any art or anything like that on this phone. For something like that, you're really going to need something like a Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra that's actually meant for that sort of activity. But if you're just using the stylus to write handwritten notes, navigate through your home screen, and maybe play a game or something like that, then the stylus on this phone will at least get the job done. So in conclusion, my final thoughts about the TCL Stylus 5G. In general, for what it is, I do think this is actually a pretty good phone. It has a great display, and really if the main thing you're doing with your phone is consuming content, whether you're streaming videos, playing games, going on social media, stuff like that, or even something more simple like reading or web browsing, this phone is really going to be great for that, and in this price range, it's probably going to be one of your better options. In addition to this, while it certainly doesn't have the best camera quality in the world, it does have pretty much all the features you could ask for in a mid-range phone. So if you're taking lots of photos and you want a wider variety of features, and you're not really using your photos and videos for anything serious, more just for casual stuff like social media, then the camera setup we have here definitely will get the job done. Now this phone is not without its weaknesses. I'm not a huge fan of the materials, and the battery is a little small for this price range considering a lot of its competitors do have much larger batteries, but it also does have a really fast processor, which is definitely going to come in handy when you're doing stuff like gaming, for example, or if you're just on your phone a lot. And it does have some nice features like NFC, and of course a stylus, which not a whole lot of phones in this price range have. So overall, if you're looking for a solid mid-range phone that's going to be able to do pretty much all the daily tasks you need it to, and you're also going to be consuming a lot of content, or maybe you just want a phone with a stylus that doesn't have the price tag of a Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra. Whatever the case may be, I do think for a mid-range 5G phone, the TCL Stylus 5G is going to be a great option. But this concludes my review of the TCL Stylus 5G. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. But as always, I will see you in the next video.